Alkanes. These are carbon atoms joined together by single bonds, and they're saturated because there's no double or triple bonds. Each carbon has 4 different atoms bonded to it. Naming. Find the longest carbon chain and use the root name. Because it's an alkane, the suffix is ane, ane. Identify any side groups. These are called alkyl groups, and you just identify the number of carbons in the side group, and you take the root name and just add YL. So 1 carbon, methyl. If 2 or more side groups are present and they are different, list them alphabetically. If they are the same size, you've got 2 1-carbon side groups, then you add a prefix. So that would be dimethyl. So that indicates how many of them are present. Numbers must be used to identify which carbon on the longest carbon chain they are attached to. Use the lowest possible number combinations. You keep going in the straight chain, but if it's 3,4 dimethyl or 5,6 dimethyl, you go with the 3,4 dimethyl. So you change the end of the carbon chain that you count from. If only 2 numbers are used and they are the same distance from each end, then the lower number goes with the side group that comes alphabetically first. Okay, we'll do a couple of examples. This here has 3 carbons and saturated, so it's an alkane. Look in your root word table until it's memorized. 3 carbons is prop. So this compound is propane. No side groups. All right, here we have, it's a little more complicated. It's a great idea to use a highlighter on your structures to find the longest carbon chain. So if we go from left to right, there's 4 carbons in a straight chain. If we go from the bottom and then to the right, there's 4 carbons in the longest carbon chain. Or if you go backwards, there's 4 carbons in the longest carbon chain. So no matter which way we go, the longest carbon chain is 4. So now that you've got the longest carbon chain selected, we know that the root is bute, and it's an alkane, so it's butane. But we haven't accounted for all the carbons, so you take a look then at any other carbons that you have present. So here we have a CH3, so 1 carbon, so that makes it a methyl group. And if we count left to right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're just counting on the longest carbon chain. And just because sometimes it's more complicated, you also count from the reverse way. Which carbon is it on? It's either on carbon 2 or carbon 3, based on which end you counted from. 2 is the lowest, so the number 2 in red is the lowest number. So this methyl group is on carbon number 2. So this is our prefix. This is 2-methyl because there's 1 carbon. Butane. So this compound contains 5 carbons. The longest carbon chain is butane, 4 carbons, and there's a side group of 1 carbon on the second carbon in the longest carbon chain. So this is 2-methylbutane. Okay, we're going for something a little more complicated here. So you're going to get out your highlighter and you're going to see which way is the longest carbon chain. When you look at it, first of all, it looks like that is the longest carbon chain. It has to be the longest continuous. You can't lift your pen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we can also go 4, 5, 6. Or we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it looks like 6 is the longest carbon chain. So pick the simplest longest carbon chain here. Okay. So 6 means hex. So this is hexane. And we have some side groups. We've got a methyl group here because it's 1 carbon, a methyl group here because it's 1 carbon, and here you have an ethyl group. Okay, so we've got 2 methyl groups, so that's considered dimethyl, but you don't count the D from di in the alphabet order. You count it as a methyl. Ethyl comes before methyl in the alphabet, so this is going to be something ethyl, dimethyl, hexane. So now we have to figure out the position of those carbons, side groups on the main chain. So we're going to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, left to right. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right to left. So we need to find the shortest or the lowest combination. So if we start from the left with the red numbers, our combinations are going to be 2, 3, and 4. If we go from counting from the left, our numbers are 3, 4, and 5. So the number combination in red gives us lower numbers. So that is the side that we're going to start counting from. We're going to count from the left. So our ethyl group is on carbon number 4. So we put a 4 in front of the ethyl. And then the carbons, the single carbons are on carbon number 2, comma, and carbon number 3, and you put dashes in between. So 4 ethyl, 2, 3 dimethyl hexane is the correct name for this compound. There, I just wrote it out more neater for you. Okay, drawing alkanes. Structural diagrams, you just draw the carbons in the longest carbon chain, add bonds for all the other atoms, and then add the side groups to the appropriate carbons. Fill in the remaining hydrogens. For a line structure, it's basically just the bonds between the carbons. At each bend is a saturated carbon. No actual atoms are written in. So if I do for you propane, no, let's do butane. This is 4 carbons. So put down your longest carbon backbone first. Each carbon has 4 bonds. Now, there's no side group in this name, so the atoms are all hydrogens. So you're supposed to show all your hydrogen atoms now. So draw the carbon chain, put in the bonds, the lines for the bonds, and then add your hydrogens. For the line structure for this, it is literally a zigzag. So that end of each of at the end of each line is a carbon. So that's 2 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the line diagram for butane. So there's 4 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to number them, I'm just showing you where they are. You don't write in any atoms at all. Okay, drawing 3-methylpentane. Pent is 5. So draw your longest carbon chain, put in your bonds. And then on my 3rd carbon, I have a single carbon, a methyl group. So 1, 2, 3 would put me here. 1, 2, 3. It doesn't matter which end you count from. It's the same carbon. Sometimes we write CH3 just like that and put in all the others as hydrogens. But I will show all of them. Now it can get a bit messy, which is why some people like the line diagram. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the pentane, that's the backbone. And then there's a side group on the 3rd carbon. 2-methylbutane. So my longest carbon chain is 4. Put in the bonds. And carbon 2 has a methyl group. So 1, 2, 3 hydrogens. So this is 2-methylbutane because the longest carbon chain is 4, and the side group, which has 1 carbon, is on the 2nd carbon. Now you could have drawn it slightly different. You could have counted from the other direction, and then this would be carbon 2. So always pay attention when you're naming a compound that you're counting from both ends, so that you wouldn't name this 3-methyl. It's actually 2-methyl because it can flip. You can turn it over and count from the other end. So that is also 2-methylbutane. And then if you were going to draw the line structure, the zigzag has 4 carbons, and then carbon number 2 has the side group. I could put it there, or I could put it there. In terms of physical properties, alkanes are nonpolar. The difference in electronegativity between the carbons is 0. Between the carbons and the hydrogens is 0.4. Therefore, only London dispersion forces are present as intermolecular forces. These are very weak. That means less energy will be required to overcome them, to separate molecules from each other. Therefore, they have very low boiling points and melting points. In fact, if your carbon length is 1 to 3, you're actually a gas at room temperature. Because they are nonpolar, they cannot hydrogen bond with water, so they are non-soluble in water. They will not dissolve in water, but they are soluble in benzene or other nonpolar solvents.